Oh, perfect.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Boris Mann. This is your first App Protocol Dev Tech Talk for January 2025. So happy New Year, everyone. I was talking to Miss Boba at the end of the year, and we decided to put this into the first presentation. She's put on together a great talk about some of the stuff that she's doing with her very beginner community, and how she's using the app protocol to teach them about how the web works and build things that are valuable for their community. So take it away, Miss Boba.
Perfect. Okay, so hello and welcome. My name is Miss Boba, and I'm here representing FujoCoded, which is a somewhat unusual company, as you see from the Comic Sans, and with, as you'll see in the talk, a bold and ambitious mission. So this talk, as we said, is designed for questions at the end. So with this, here's a bit about myself. I came online not even a teen in the very, very early 2000s and immediately started making fan sites, which are smallish websites dedicated to fictional characters or series. My first one was about Evangelion, then I made Inuyasha sites, and then my ambition slowly grew until I was learning PHP and SQL, getting a computer science degree, and moving to the US to work in big tech. So at this point, I've been coding for more than 20 years. Throughout my life, the internet has been incredibly important to me. I don't owe it just my career, I owe it my partner, many of my friends, tons of personal self-discovery, and above all, the community that has carried me through some hard times. So a few years ago, when I realized the internet was starting to suck, I really, really wanted to do something about it. So I started a quest to figure out how to help this place and my community out of the downward spirals we were and are in. The first step was building Boba, a forum-like software specifically designed for small communities to curate content from across the web and have discussion in the safety of pseudonymity while maintaining fine-grained control over structure and moderation. Boba, which is now being built as a sociocratic organization by its own community, taught me a lot about the needs of online folks. But more importantly, it showed me the difficulties they face in both coming together to build belonging and organizing together to build software. From this, FujoCoded came on, which I'm here as a representative of today. So our mission is to empower online subcultures to shape their own online world, both by creating software, but way more importantly, by teaching them the skills they need to come together and make this software theirs. So this mission is broadly applicable, but FujoCoded focuses first and foremost on one specific community I'm part of, the Fujin community, which is a subset of fanworks fandom. So today, I'm here to tell you not only about the app proto projects we built, but about how we engage with less technical folks and why it's important to do so, especially when it comes to protocols. But for you to appreciate what we're doing, I need to tell you a little bit about our audience. So, fanworks fandom is a broad term, but to keep it simple, it refers to the community centered around creating fan arts, fan fiction, and other creating works derived from existing media. So if you've been on the internet online, I'm sure you've seen us around. But here's two things you might not know. First, fanworks fandom and shipping fandom, which is one of its sub-niches, have been around a long time. However, we've been always on legally shaky grounds to copyright law. And for this and other reason, participation used to be highly stigmatized. And it still kind of is if you are in the fringe parts of it, like we are. So historically, we've relied on the online world for protections and on anonymity. Not only do we run a lot of initiatives, events, and projects online, some with decades of history and thousands of participants, but we do so without knowing each other's names or faces. So second, despite the stigma, we have made a lot of contribution to both the offline and the online. So from saving beloved series like Star Trek to archival work of both sites and media, from creating an archive of our own, which fills thousands of fan fiction requests each minute on an exclusively volunteer staff, to making a significant portion of the reaction GIFs you use, from challenging legal cases that put the internet in danger to, and this is our own achievement, raising $18,000 to teach Git and GitHub to coding beginners. So I'm not here to tell you who we are, but I'm here to tell you about why that should matter to you. And I'm going to do that by borrowing the words of someone you might know. And that is Matthew Shklovsky, the founder of Pinboard. So in 2013, he gave a talk about his enemies to lovers running with fandom that completely changed his perspective on both us and the relationship between communities and platforms. It's not a very long talk, and as the shirtless picture of Kirk and Spock clearly demonstrates, it's an interesting one. So I invite you to read this later, but here's the gist. In his words, Matthew used to be a real jerk about fandom and to make fun of them, until, the story goes, Delicious ex-community manager told him, "You should look at how effective people are using Delicious tags. They're doing crazy stuff." So after his initial "no way fan fiction is lame" reaction, Matthew went to check, and again in his own words, he found that fans were indeed doing something incredible. They hadn't simply used the tagging tools Delicious had given them, they had converged on a set of elaborate tagging conventions that allowed them to turn Delicious into a custom search engine for fanfic. So without ever having to put together a technical committee or sit in a standards meeting, fans MacGyver together a real community-led classification system, complete with GreaseMonkey script and browser extensions. So there is a lot to this story, including a 52 pages collaborative Google Doc entirely coordinated by anonymous folks on the Google Doc chat features. But again, please do check out the talk. So spoilers ahead, here's the conclusions. First of all, communities are not something you can engineer. In Matthew's words, to get people involved in your site, treat them with respect and give them room to do it in their own terms. And second, it's worse again, fans are an example of real people using machines to talk to one another. Fans are a community that's already happening on the internet, and we've been doing it for a very long time. And third, for all their faults, online subcultures are a place of joy and connections for many, the opposite of the soulless, constantly infighting and alienating internet of today. So these lessons are why I'm here today and why I built the project you'll learn about in a second. But as far as AdProt is far from the first attempt at trying to make decentralized social media happen. But now more than ever, people online do feel the need for what we're trying to do. And we owe it to them, I believe, to build something that works for real people doing real community on the internet. So as Matthew said, fans have a lot to teach us all when it comes to this. So with this, let's get to our project. This November, after the elections, I needed a little bit of a pick-me-up. So with FujoCoded's flagship efforts winding down for the holidays, I decided to use my live coding streams to explore something I've been pondering for a long time. How do we get fans interested in open decentralized protocols and involved in projects like AdProto? So this is obviously a very complicated question, but it's also one where having an insider view helps. Indeed, as we say in my country, I know my chickens, and my chickens, whether they admit it or not, love falling for bait. And AdProt in particular has one piece of delicious tasting bait I knew fans wouldn't be able to resist, and that is the labeling system. Fans have a primal need to label things. So after all, you've seen what happened with tags on Delicious. So when I saw people on Blue Sky creating decorative labels, or in my opinion, more correctly, badges, I immediately knew we had the perfect entry point to pique their interest. After all, Here are some old school website badges on the very modern sites of some of our community members. Modern socials might have severely damaged web badges culture, but in our corner of the web, it's alive, well, and ripe for exploiting. So we have the perfect bait, but what are we gonna do with it? Now, before we go to the next slide, remember, we might be a bit weird, but we come in peace. So here it is. In the shipping fandom community, which characters you pair with each other is incredibly serious business. Some people are fairly omnivorous and open to experiences many different couplings, often at the same time, while others have fairly fixed configurations and might go as far as muting or blocking people who ship their favorite character the wrong way. Now, this may seem like an overreaction, but it's something we deeply respect. Our hobby is meant to make people happy, and we believe people have the right not to engage with content they don't like for any reason. So, like it often happens with niche communities, our culture might make a little sense from the outside. So you just have to trust me. This is a thing. It's so much a thing that when Japanese fans made a comic mapping different types of shippers to different animals, it became a worldwide community meme. And so I asked the FujoCoded community to help turn these animals into a set of labels and got to work on our first project. That is the Fujin labeler. For people who don't know about labelers, here's how they work. First, people subscribe to a labeler account, which allows them to see what labels the account has assigned to posts or users. Second, and this varies labeler by labeler, people like a post associated with a specific label. And on the slide, you can see a couple such posts from the Fujin labeler. Then things happen. And fourth, a label will be assigned to people's account or displayed on their posts. So labels were originally added to @proto for moderation purposes. However, some people like us are using them purely for aesthetic reason. And indeed, here is my Blue Sky account and my proud Turtle Fujin label. So I streamed myself building this labeler in the course of 2-3 hours, but I didn't make it from scratch. Rather, I used Alice's labeler starter kit to do the bulk of the technical work, while I used this time to learn more about @proto. In particular, I used this time to, in particular, I used this to help my community understand it alongside me while building something that excites them. So now I'm going to tell you what we learned. For many of you, as I was mentioning, there will be a lot you already know. But here's the thing. First, many in my community have asked to see this talk, and I want them to be able to follow it. And also, Trojan horse some teaching in the process. And second, I want you technical folks to see how I talk about @proto to less technical people and show that it's possible to talk about protocols in a slightly simplified but accessible way. So just keep in mind that I would generally pause and let people ask questions after each big chunk. So now, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to directly address our less technical fun-ish audience. So with this, let's start. So in this talk and beyond, you've heard people talk about @proto. Now, this term may feel magical for Rhines, and especially if you've tried looking it up on your own, utterly confusing. But if we go slowly, I swear it's a lot more approachable than it might seem. Since the early days of the web, fandom people have had to scramble to work around platform limitations and to build tools that help them make software work for them rather than against them. Tags on Delicious are a relevant example, but you might remember extensions like XKit for Tumblr or tools like TweetDeck. In most cases, platforms have a fraught relationship with these tools. At best, they tolerate them. At medium, they break them. And at worst, they acquire them and turn them into prohibitively expensive paid offerings. So if you hate this, you're in luck. So do many technologists. Wouldn't it be nice, they sometimes ask themselves, if the software we built was designed to be compatible with other software, so anyone could come provide additional tools and services. To make this possible, those who share this dream need to do something that is really, really hard. Agree on how the relevant data should be shaped and how actions taken on it should be represented and communicated across programs. This is what's technically known as a protocol, a set of rules that, if followed, allow different applications to understand each other and work together on the same data. Now, you already use protocols every day without thinking about them. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are protocols, for example, and every time you visit a website, you're using HTTP, a protocol that lets your browser talk to web servers, either to request data be sent to you or to communicate actions you've taken. But while using protocols is hopefully easy for the users, making a new protocol and getting people to use it to build useful, beloved, widely adopted software is really, really hard. And across the history of the internet, doing so for social networks has been particularly hard, with many attempts and kind of mixed successes. But technologies are nothing if not full of hubris. So from time to time, a new group comes and decides to try again. The latest carriers of this tradition are the Blue Sky developers. First, they studied software built using existing protocols, like Mastodon, to understand what's keeping more users from adopting open social platforms. Then they got together to coordinate building the AT protocol, AT-Proto for short, and its first test application, Blue Sky. So, using Blue Sky as a testing ground, they're hoping to convince other folks, that is us, to give this new protocol a chance and to use our precious time and resources to come build new tools and platforms on top of it. Now, protocols have many moving parts, and this is where people usually bring up diagrams like the one you see here, which is a simplified view of how AT-Proto works. So if you're feeling your soul leave your body at this stage, trust me, you're far from alone. But here's the secret. You do not need to understand that diagram to start understanding AT-Proto. Actually, I want you to completely forget about the diagram. Instead, I want to show you something cool that will help you see how it all works in practice, something whose value is both easily understandable and broadly applicable, never mind the rest of the protocol. And that is your personal data server. So, when a user creates an account on an AT-Proto application like Blue Sky, it creates and assigns them their own personal data server, also known as a PDS. A PDS is a collection of all the data associated with you as a user. In traditional social networks, this data is owned by the application you create an account on and locked down within it. Instead, think of a PDS as your personal folder of data that different software can both read from and with your authorization write to. So PDSs are one of the central concepts in AT-Proto, and in my opinion, the coolest. And the reason they're the coolest is that they speak to a major pain point users feel nowadays, the desire for data ownership. So we've too often been locked into platforms we don't like, run by people we don't like, not just because all our friends are there, but because they own our data. Moving somewhere else means losing all the posts we made, all our images, all our meticulously tagged reblogs, and often, without careful planning and refollowing, it means accidentally losing some of our connections, even when our friends do want to move platforms with us. This friction keeps us locked in place, knowing that moving platforms means rebuilding from scratch over and over again. With a PDS, however, all your data is accessible by any application, which means AT-Proto-based services cannot use holding it hostage as a means to keep you from breaking up with them. But this is not the only cool things about PDSs. So when one is created, each of them is also assigned a sequence of letters and numbers, which uniquely identifies it across the whole AT-Proto network. The sequence, called a decentralized identifier, or DID for friends, is you and no one but you, no matter what service you originally signed up on, what your current username is, or even who is hosting this folder with all your data. Everything you do in NetProto refers back to you by using your DID. This has another very juicy consequence. Since a DID is not tied to a specific URL or service, it means that application can find and refer to your data regardless of who is currently keeping it safe and online for you. While by default, Blue Sky creates and hosts your PDS when you first sign up, you can at any point in time decide to move it to a different service or even keep it in your own server. With this, should Blue Sky ever ban your account, and to be clear, they can still do so, your data will be safe with you and can be used to rebuild your presence somewhere else. So with this, time to go deeper. We said a PDS is like a folder that contains all the data associated with you. Here you can see a list of all the subfolders in my account. That is, as you can intuit from the app.bluesky prefixes, my Blue Sky data. Now, unfortunately, and shame on me, I haven't had the chance to explore other AppProto applications yet. So here, to quickly show you, is the data of someone who has, as they say, tried to catch them all. See how the prefixes change? By clicking through these different collections, you can, just like any other application, see the publicly available data each service associates with the owner of this PDS. But let's get practical. What is inside this folder and what does the data look like? The name often is a clue. For example, app.bluesky.actor.profile will contain the data of yours, or in this case, my Blue Sky profile. If you look on the app, you can see how Blue Sky is using this data. But remember, just because it's in the Blue Sky folder, it doesn't mean that only Blue Sky can write or read it. It just means they're the ones that define its shape and properties. Similarly, if you go look in the Blue Sky feed post subfolder, you'll find every post you've ever made. And here you can see the one I showed you earlier in all this glory. So I'll leave looking into the graph.follow part as homework. Instead, I want to show you one last example and bring us back to the beginning. Remember the turtle Fujin labels proudly displayed under my avatar? How does our labeler know I should be assigned that label? Well, here's my likes. And guess what you'll find if you go rummaging through them? Our labeler's turtle post. So since my likes are public, our Fujin labeler program can read my likes to know I want a label and which label I want. No one can, for better or worse, stop it from doing so. But as you can imagine, going through all the users in the network to look at all their likes would be very time-consuming, no matter how fast your program is. So our labeler does something slightly different. It listens to what AppProto calls the fire hose. The fire hose is an almost literal stream of everything that happens in the network. Every post, every like, every unlike too. You can imagine our labeler program sitting at the bottom of the stream and waiting for the corpse of its enemy, a like on its post, to pass. Once it sees it, the program goes and assigns the correct label. Thanks to the fire hose, AppProto software can react to actions taken by users on the network, no matter what application those changes originate from. And this is what a protocol allows us to do. Now, obviously, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are downsides to having all data and actions publicly available for everyone to consume. So 2 final things. First, this goes to an unfortunate truth when it comes to programming. Every choice comes with trade-offs. Creating software is often a push and pull, a give and take between different needs and constraints. Choices have to be made, and hard ones. This is doubly true when it comes to protocols. Second, with this say, I want to reassure you, everyone is very aware of the need for private data and actions. After all, they are some of the most requested features. But while AppProto developers have some ideas of how private data could work without losing what makes PDSs cool, it might still take a while before this becomes possible. The creation of new protocols is incredibly hard to coordinate. And once they're out there in the wild, it's incredibly hard to put the genie back in the bottle. So it's worth taking time to do things right and to start with the simple cases to understand how real people use this idea in practice. Because, to steal Matthew's words again, just because you wrote it, it doesn't mean you know what your protocol is for. And with this, we're done. So here's how I usually introduce @proto to people. It's pretty dense, and I wouldn't blame like beginners for pausing here, taking a walk, and rewatching this part again. But I found it usually resonates with people and gets them to understand what @proto is and to be excited about what it can do. But this is not the only project we've built. So let's get to the second one. So once again, our next project is deeply tied with shipping fandom culture. So here we have two disjoint sets of labels taken directly from the ever-popular fanfiction website Archive of Our Own. They are ratings. Every fanfiction on AO3 has one and only one associated rating, according to its spice level, from general to explicit. Then warnings. On AO3, you can mark your fanfiction as including specific types of quote-unquote upsetting content, no content of this type, or a convenient chooses not to say, which is helpful for people who don't want to bother with labels or stories whose emotional beats hinge on not knowing what you're going to get. The same fanfiction, and thus the same Blue Sky account, can have multiple of these warnings. So now you might be thinking, this is prime grounds for putting the moderation back into labelers, but this labeler is explicitly marked as being just for fancies. There's a few reasons for this, and the biggest one of them all is that I've been online for a long time, I run multiple communities, and long story short, you cannot pay me enough to make me do moderation. It's a thankless job, and I know much better than to become an arbiter of who should get which label. But while we aren't officially doing moderation, I want to point out that nothing stops people from using these labels to decide whether to follow, not follow, or even block a user. Even without acting as an official moderation tool, account badges can be a sort of before you follow, a warning system that lets people know what type of content may be posted by that account and allows them to take manual action as they see fit. So, if last time we explored protocols and PDSs, what should we use this labeler to explore? So last time, again, we looked at my own PDS. Now here's the question. What does a labeler's PDS look like? And how is it different from a user's? So two things. First, we have a Blue Sky's labeler service configuration, which shows the value of the labels our labeler can assign and their configuration. For example, whether they automatically blur images in post or whether they identify the content as adult only. But the real star of the show is this @protolabeler URL under services. This is where the magic really happens. In the starter kit, you'll find a command to mark your PDS as providing a labeler service and to add the URL of your labeler program. Once you do this, Blue Sky will recognize the associated account as a labeler and change its avatar to a square, which it uses to mark these accounts. It will also provide a subscribe to labeler button for people to opt into this service. So what now? How does the labeler service effectively work? Here's the trick. If you visit a special address on the labeler service, you can find a list of all the labels that the labeler has assigned, each with the name of the label and the DID of the user the label is assigned to. This too is part of what @proto defines. To be an @proto labeling service, you need to add that address. This way, any application like Blue Sky can visit it, read the list of assigned labels, and build its view of what label is assigned to which user in the network. Now, you may be asking, well, this is all fine and dandy, but how do I figure out that this address exists? And that's a great question. It once again goes back to the big problem of designing flexible protocols that anyone can use. And that's that people need to agree on what the shape of the data is and how to take actions on it. Actions like listing all the labels that a service has assigned. So how does a proto solve this? It does so in two phases. First, word of God, in this case, the people that decided what proto labelers should do and how, agree that these actions will be available, what URLs they'll be associated with, and how they will work. Then they write a lexicon. Lexicons are special configuration files that describe what endpoints exist, what they do, how to access them, and what type of data they will give back. They can be used to both discover features applications make available and to automatically generate code and documentation for others to use. So if you're ever curious about what can you do with a service or collection, go look up the associated lexicon. And so with this, I hope you're all feeling pretty confident with our understanding of labelers. So time for our last project, the fanworks labelers. From here on, the presentation is going to get a bit more technical, so I can appropriately entertain our hosts. I hope everyone will still be able to follow, but some words may fly over casual listeners' heads. Don't worry about it. Okay, so now this is a slightly different project than the ones before. First of all, we are going to label posts instead of people. Next, we are not going to like posts to assign labels. Instead, we are going to go outside the Blue Sky app and allow people to use their Blue Sky account to sign into an independent website that allows them to assign labels. This means, alas, I had to take one for the team and had to implement an OAuth sign-in flow, something I've done entirely too many times in my developer life, of which I've enjoyed exactly zero. But complaints about OAuth aside, here is how our website ended up looking. This is a simple Astro site using their new Actions framework that makes building forms honestly a breeze. Astro is very beloved in our community by coders at all levels. So this was the perfect chance for me to create a reference implementation for an Astro website integrated with that proto. So as you see from the screenshot, this is how the labeler works. First, you add the URL of a post. Next, you select what type of fanwork your post contains. It may be a fanfiction, an art piece, an event, and so on. Then you submit the form. Now, one of two things happen. If the post is yours, our fanworks labeler will assign the labels you requested. Second, if the post is not yours, you get an error. This helps us avoid people labeling posts on behalf of others who might not want them labeled. Now, this isn't a particularly complex setup. The color boxes you see here are what we are hosting on the FujoCoded servers. Each is its own web server. And to keep things simple, they mostly communicate using HTTP, with some actions restricted to localhost addresses. Only the labeler server and the Astro side are exposed to the world. The main difference with our previous labeler is that we directly use the Skyward labeler library that Alice was using in her starter. So yay for more learning. However, since that's not easily extended, we had to add a separate labeling server to be our internal orchestrator of labeling requests. Don't fully take my word for anything on the top left corner. I only have a vague idea of how the app view works, and I take no responsibility for anything I say. So, with this working, let's get a bit more ambitious and add feeds. We have a series of labels indicating different types of content. So let's make a feed for each type and allow people to follow what's happening around our fanworks community. Now, you may think, wouldn't this be better achieved by using tags? But here's some food for thought. Tags are a global search indicator. If you tag something in the widespread semantic, you want everyone to be able to search for it. But the fanworks community, like many others, doesn't always benefit from a wide reach. While we might want our things to be seen and searchable, we often prefer them to remain in our network. Knowing someone has voluntarily chosen to follow the fanworks feed can be a good indicator that they're okay with our whole deal, which makes us more comfortable sharing our work. So how did we do this? We once again got some help from a starter GitHub repo, this time from the Blue Sky team itself. Now, to see how our feeds work, time for an old friend. So welcome back to PDS-LS. In order to make our feeds appear on Blue Sky, we ran a script provided from the starter kit. This added an app.bluesky.feed.generator collection in our accounts PDS with one entry for each feed displayed in the Blue Sky app. So now that these feeds are in our PDS and on Blue Sky, how do applications know what's in the feed? You may be thinking, well, let's check the feed service in our PDS like we did for the labeler. And that's a good suggestion, except there is no feed service. So if you think about it, it kind of makes intuitive sense. An account that includes a labeler service effectively becomes a labeler that people can subscribe to. But any regular account can provide feeds. So how do we get our feeds? Let's go back to our feed entry and let's check the value called DID. This is the identifier of something in the network, but what? Well, here's a new trick. With a DID web value, which is a special type of DID, we can go to its .wellknown/did.json page to learn more about it. Once we do that, we'll see a Blue Sky feed generator service. This feed entry, like other feeds entries, uses this DID value to refer to a separate feed service that exists on the network and is used to generate this feed. With this in mind, let's look at the feeds lexicon to figure out how to access our feed. So here's the definition of one of the actions defined by the app.bluesky.feed lexicon. As you can see, it shows, among others, two things: the address at which the action is provided and the parameters of the action. Armed with this, let's build our feed URL. First, we need the address of our feed service, which we found at the DID. Next, we need the information about the URL and params for our lexicon. And last, we need the @URI of our feed, that is its unique network address, which we can find in our record. With this, we can go to that address and finally see what posts are in our feed. Now, rather than the whole post, this feed only returns a list of @URLs, each of which corresponds to a post. It's easy from these URLs to go fetch the data about each post, and being able to just return the addresses makes feeds a lot easier to build and run. And so here's the last part of our project. We've allowed people to label their own posts. We've turned these labels into a feed. So what's left? Let's do something bolder. We'll now allow people to label other people's posts, but we'll make sure they're using their great power with great responsibility, and we'll do so by implementing an approval system. From now on, if the post is labeled by someone other than the author, we won't return an error. Instead, we'll send a request to a Discord server via a bot, then wait for people to either react with the tick emoji to approve the request or the X emoji to deny it. Why Discord? Well, fandom folks and many others are already there. Our events are organized and coordinated there. Our own FujoCoded projects all have their own Discord server. So we just go where people already are. And once again, this isn't particularly complicated. All we did was add a new internal-only web server that also serves as an interface for our Discord bot. The Astro site is in charge to route the request correctly, according to whether the signed user matches the owner of the post to label. If they match, business as usual. If they don't match, the request is sent via localhost to the Discord server, which then uses discord.js to send a message to our bot. Last, our server waits to receive either a tick or X reaction, and if needed, reaches out to the labeling server to ask for the label to be added. And this last bit of the project is almost done. I probably need 2 more streams to get it polished up and ready. The most important thing I want to try and get done is turning this into a NixOS module. Without going too much into the weeds, this would allow people to get this setup up and running by writing a simple file. Here, for example, is the configuration for Boba board, our community platform. As you can see, this configuration is fairly simple, and once everything is correctly configured, it automatically brings up all the programs and services needed to run the application. Our hope is to focus on teaching folks how to handle this type of NixOS configuration, so we can make it as easy as possible for them to self-host projects like this, rather than being forced to figure out how to monetize them as services. After all, our goal is not simply to provide this as tools. We want people to learn how to customize them and make them available for their own communities. So with this, we're done with the project. Last section. Why did we do all this? Is it because we think labelers will, like the labelers we made, will move a significant amount of fandom folks to Blue Sky? Is it because we want everyone in our community to come make their own labelers? Is it because we want people to use our cool labeler feeds Discord integration? Not at all. While all of these are nice things to happen, if they do, our secret plan is much more sinister. And that is to join community initiatives like lexicon.community. If you're not familiar, this initiative aims to get people from the larger AppProto community to work on independent shared lexicon, that is, the shapes of data and available actions, to be owned by the community. One such example is the bookmarks lexicon, which has already been approved and is now at the figure out how to get in the app stage. I know this because I've helped with the TypeScript library and have been keeping tabs on related discussions. Now, rather than being owned by Blue Sky, these lexicons are supposed to be by the people for the people. But here's my question. Who are the people? Not who do we wish the people were? Who are the people who can show up and join these discussions? Well, usually, these people are technical folks, and a very specific type of technical person at that. After all, think about what one needs to join an effort like this. First, someone would need to know that this is happening and why it matters. Then, they would need to know enough about protocols and AppProto to understand what is being discussed. Then, they would need to understand what a RFC is, never mind being able to parse the technical language in the proposals. These are a lot of structural barriers in place, and through no fault of the lexicon community organizer. This is just how these things work. Now, protocols are about getting people together to decide how they're going to communicate. Lexicons are a fundamental stepping stone towards that. The shapes and actions defined at this stage by initiatives like this one are going to have long-term repercussions on how the network is shaped and what is easy or hard to build on it. If niche online communities like Fandom want to make this protocol also ours, it's important that we learn how to do something we don't have a lot of institutional experience with. Join these discussions and contribute our opinions, of which, as you can see from the length of our comments, we have quite a few. Thing is, I believe it's hard from outsiders to know they do want to join these discussions, and for us technical folks to see what's keeping them from doing so and how to help them meaningfully contribute. What I've found is that with a little bit of knowledge and a technical person steering the discussion, lay people can and will gladly give us valuable insights and also learn technical skills in the process. So I invite you to take a look at our feedback to see what we came up with, as well as watching a recording of or join one of our live discussions. But even without going as far as having people join lexicon initiatives, which will always have some barriers, no matter how much we smooth the way, there's a lot we can do to engage people and grow their awareness of practices surrounding open platforms. For example, here's a GitHub issue requesting to increase the number of labelers people can subscribe to. When we found it, it had 6 upvotes. After building our labelers and asking our community to come help us, we brought it from 6 to 47 upvotes and to the first page of the Blue Sky GitHub issues when ordered by number of them. So now, there are valid technical reasons for the limit on labelers, and I imagine the Blue Sky team likely thinks the solution isn't to just continue increasing this limit, which I would agree with. But this achieves 2 things. First, it shows us that people can and want to be engaged, and it shows them that they can do so and how. We'll make sure to use this power again when the right time comes. And next, we've learned from the hobbyist coders in our community that upvoting, commenting on, or creating a GitHub issue was often their first foray into the world of open source. By finding good excuses to push people to do so, we hope to get more of them to come look around and take simple steps to get involved with the projects they care about. So to go back to Matthew's words, fans are a real example of real people using machines to talk to one another, and they've been doing so for a very long time. And while our community has, like any community, a lot of ups and downs, internal wank, historical chaos, and so on, we've also learned a lot about how to do the internet, which we do in a radically different way from many of you. Eventually, and I say this with all the love in my heart, it's up to us to stop tech folks from continuing to pursue what seems to be a deep ingrained instinct, which is reinventing the centralized Twitter. By bringing our experiences to the table, we can help avoid encoding these platform biases at the lower levels of the protocol and bring a bit more Tumblr, a bit more Amino, a bit more LiveJournal, a bit more AO3 to this ecosystem. All sites that, while they may not be your personal favorite and are even actively looked down upon by some, have been beloved by people like us and have helped us build joy, love, friendship, and above all, community on the internet. To conclude, when people try to make the centralized social networks happen, they focus on getting developers on board so they can build TikTok, but on @proto, Reddit, but on @proto, Plank, but on @proto. I believe that's the wrong way to look at the problem. Now more than ever, people out there want what open networks can give them, rather than, or in addition to, convincing the developers of today to come build platforms on the centralized protocols. We need to enable new people to pick up the right tools so they can come and find their spot in the big picture, whether it's joining lexicon discussions, filing issues, coding a new library, building a new services, running a relay, or the many things that a good modular design like @protos allows. Then they gradually invite others in their community to come find their own places so they can build new services that shine not because they're the TikTok of everyone, but because they're tools real community use, nurture, and make available for others in their community and beyond. Because the truth is that eventually building a new, meaningfully different web cannot be done with the same tools, people, and incentives that built the one we've now effectively lost. And with this, the talk is done. So feel free to ask questions, subscribe to our newsletter if you want to keep in touch, and we have a Patreon and other ways to support us. And we're done.
Amazing, 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 amazing.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the work that you put into the talk. It clearly shows. We're definitely going to have to talk about if you're available to come to the Atmosphere Conf in March, because I think this is the exact sort of thing that needs to be supported. So yeah, really, really amazingly done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, questions. I know Ria had one already. Um, I'll just scroll back to the one, and I think Nick can probably speak to that well. So the question was about the fire hose. Is the idea that you have a fire hose for each service? For example, Blue Sky, or would it ever have every event that happens on any service compatible with the protocol? So I left some comments in the chat there already. Right now, the Blue Sky operated fire hose, and I believe all of the fire hose that people are running actually carry all lexicon events and data types. Basically everything other than the core Blue Sky ones are like a drop in the bucket right now, and it's something that Blue Sky wants to encourage. Probably at scale, for certain lexicon types, you might want to run your own for efficiency services, and or not having to run the entire fire hose. Nick, who's the developer of Smoke Signal Events, can maybe you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's I think a few different ways that people are exploring running fire hoses and connecting to them. Like I think it makes a lot of sense for example, y'all can hear me, correct? I got a little notification. Thumbs up, great. Okay. There's spoken wheel, there's non-archival relays and fire hoses. There are bespoke fire hoses that might be application or community specific, where you want to filter out everything that does not include a certain type or is pre-filtered based on the community's own accepted moderation processes, tools, and data. So I don't really think that there's entirely a one size fits all, but I do think that there is a very large need and interest for regional sort of edge relays that allow applications, data centers, and communities the ability to have their data as close to local as possible in their own like actual regions, countries, districts, etc.
Ria, does that answer your question? And you feel free to unmute and talk live if you want, or just type your answer and I'll get it on audio for you. Amazing. Other questions for Ms. Boba? Yeah, so I think for me, you did a great job just building up all of these things at the end of the day. And yeah, and it, just to be super clear, level of expertise or about app proto, speaking for myself, all of this is interesting. I think ultimately the right kind of technologist is in fact super interested in what other people do with it. There was a comment from Ben H earlier on, basically saying like, you think you know what you built your protocol for, but that's the whole point of just because you built it doesn't mean you know what your protocol is for. Labelers being one of those surprises, I think. And how do you think? Do you think it's possible, Ms. Boba, to get more fan ownership of operating services directly, or do you have any thoughts of where you'll go with that?
Yeah. So first of all, I always found it funny when people said that, the way labelers have been used for just like badging purposes. Someone told me that it caught the Blue Sky developers by surprise, and I was like, how? Like that's the first thing. Like I as soon as I saw them, I was like, oh, we are going to do weird things with them. And which I think speaks a little bit to just like everything I've said, that if you have a diverse community, you would have caught that immediately. Like as soon as you brought up, oh, we're gonna put a badge on a profile, someone would have been like, yeah, people are gonna use them for very many things. But as far as running our own services go, I mean, I would love to personally. I think part of it will depend on kind of like how the network evolves. So what I think, and part of why I like @proto is that I like it because it's very modular, which I think means, and that's kind of the goal, that people that care about things and that have different skills can really, really focus on what they do right. And not only that, but they can also kind of understand what the right model, maybe for financing something like a big relay, a big firehose could be. So I don't really think that we're ever gonna run any of like the big parts of this. But personally, I think that PDSs are like a great place that we could focus on. In part because, as I said, like our community really feels the need for data ownership, but also because I find, and I don't, this actually didn't make it in the talk, but I do think that one of like the cool thing about @proto and kind of like the mental shift that we need to do is that it really is about the user creating data and then this data being broadcast out across the network. So, the part where the data is created, the part where you write into a PDS or you take an action, that is the most exciting to me. And that one, I think, is the one that has the most potential for being economically feasible for us to run with for our community, legally feasible for us to know the boundaries of things like hosting fan content. Because as I said, like the legal ground, it has some like some edges that are not yet well defined, and actually AO3, which I mentioned, does actual legal advocacy for that. Like it challenges cases in which fanworks might be in danger. And so the thing is, if you have a service that is run by people that are fans, they will know what they can legally defend you for if you have a PDS and they're hosting your fans, and what they can't. And so that type of specialization, I think it's very, very ripe for communities to take care of on their own, just because of that. You know your community, you know their needs, you know what they like to do and how. And so, yeah, I think that would be, in my opinion, the first thing I would focus on. I also haven't had that big of a chance to look at app views, and I'm kind of interested in it. My hope would be that we eventually land on a type of design where we do want to make our own lexicons, and we do not need to re-implement an app just for people to being able to see them. So my dream is not to need to figure out how to run an app view, how to get all feeds and so on. And if the Blue Sky folks and like the other people here help us do that, I would love for us to just be able to do the things we're good for. And that would be a PDS, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of I'll say mystique about app view. Like we throw a lot around these words, but all of the lines are really, really fuzzy. And I almost just like to say app. So there's probably something there. And everybody, I think right now, wishes that they could define and stand up an app view. And we don't quite have that kind of 1, 2, 3. Enigmalia talks about help with getting fandom to host their own services would be managed hosting. I think, yeah, absolutely. There's a couple popping up. I think one of the ones the only ones that I know that's live is an IT guy in Germany. And there should be more coming around. Nick has a question. Do you want to just read out what you posted there live, Nick?
Yeah, totally. So first, really appreciate the shout out to Lexicon community. It's a passion project of mine, and I'm really glad to get so many people involved. I think my question to you, as someone who interacts with communities at varying degrees of technicality, where do you think the line should be drawn in terms of creating communities and finding a balance between creating developer-focused and centric interaction and engagement in an open way, but also helping inform and educate people who are curious but don't really understand enough to fully contribute meaningfully?
Yeah, I mean that's like a really good question, and that is I think finding these boundaries and finding like how are we gonna do that is part of what lexicon community will have to figure out, and what I hope that we can help with. And some of it will be a bit of a push and pull, because when you have a community, they have, again, very strong opinions and very strong needs, while something like lexicon.community needs to like balance things a bit more. In my opinion, having a representative from different communities being part on an effort like that, like finding someone like me that is technical enough where they can go to the community and like, we hash it out by ourselves, and then come there and we're like, here is what we think. And then, I can have these discussions with you and I understand how these things work. So I think that's a good model to start with. But really, I think it will also depend on a couple other things. But first, let me say this. I think what lexicon.community right now is doing is really like hashing this out. Doing the lexicons is okay, but figuring this out and kind of like, even negotiating with the blue sky folks on what we should be able, not be able to do, this is what it's all about. And I like, was looking at how bookmarks are making their way through it. And part of me, I was very busy with this, but like, I want to answer and be like, you're all talking about this, but like, this is really just important because you need to figure out all the little steps, whether we build the bookmarks, how it works. That's not as important as what are these procedures, what do we care about, what can we do, and how. So that's the stage we are at. And then I think, and this is also why it's important to get in at this level, because if communities need to care about like the global part, or they don't, in part needs to be on what the processes become and what you need, like what an app view and a big app view like Blue Sky is, can stop us from doing. Because if, like if we can make our small lexicons and I never have to interact with someone that's running the app view to get them displayed and used by the people I am, then I don't really care. Like I just do my lexicon, my community uses them. You do not want to get the fanfic lexicons, whatever, you get a fallback. But then that's fine. But then if that is not possible, so like if we don't land on a design that actually allows us to not care, now I need to come fight you to get like to get you to understand that my needs are important. And I hope that like other communities will also do so. I don't want to be like the only one fighting here. But so it depends. I hope that we do not need, like, I hope that we can effectively do our lexicons, and that will be enough. But I guess we'll see. And then I just want to give a shout out to for Boba Board right now, we are adopting this system called sociocracy, which is actually very interesting because it works with these ideas of circles. And then there's like, every circle is connected to other circles. And in a specific circle, it's hard to explain it in like very few words on the fly. But the idea is you can have specialized groups of people that discuss and work on their needs. And then, as I was saying, an initiative like lexicon.community can act as sort of the every representative comes and now we talk about the global thing. And I think with models like that, and I've seen some committees, like I think the TypeScript committee kind of does something like that, except that everyone is from a big browser, like from a big company. Like I think that's the model that hopefully will work out. And really the thing is, you know, I've tried in the past to get into the more, you know, more established of this, and there's just a lot of historical, like, oh, here is how we're gonna do it, and here is how everything works, and no one is going to explain it to you. So if you've never been there before, you're just gonna be like, I don't know what to do. I know the technology, I have the skill, but I'm lost.
I mean, this is the thing. Tech standards are actually just fandom with different words.
They really are. I mean, like, you know,
Lore.
when I was like preparing this talk, something that I have in my notes is like, tell the text protocol folks that they are a niche community too, because you are like the people that care about this are a niche community. Even in the tech
Yeah.
world, it's only a
Yes.
few people, and you know, so part of it is how do we stop the nerds that love protocols from, like, how do we get them to understand that we're all a big family, and yes, you know how to do protocols, and you like probably know a lot better about like all the standards things that are there than us, but eventually you have kind of like biases like we do. We may want to write like very long things, and you may want to rebuild Twitter, which again, everyone, it's really funny that, like, you know, the centralized platforms seems like the big ones keep just being Twitter.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you went through a lot there, all of which is amazing, some of which I'm going to try and kind of spin back. So this is just my personal take, and this is some of the thinking through of this. A lot of what you said boils down to agency, right? And there's a certain thing where I know the Blue Sky team really well. I'm user 22 on the network. I'm a fan of what they're doing. So I also understand that some of what they have to build is going to have to, like, they need to ship to normies, and for what makes it into the default. So one of the things that we've had a few little talks on is exactly what you said. What the ad proto community would like to enable is that there is a fallback or default display for all lexicons. That's going to be super, super tricky, including moderation and a bunch of other things like that. So getting that working on the Blue Sky default clients is going to be hard, but we'd love to get to that. I think the other part with like the bookmarks, I actually think that that's a really, really challenging one. And what I'd like to increase agency by anyone working in this space and say, hey, don't, like, super cool that you're working with the Blue Sky Social code base, and kind of showcasing how that might work. But the next step is we actually then need to maintain a fork, a couple different things. We need to maintain a fork of some of the Blue Sky Social clients so that people can actually use them, which is a whole other level of interaction. So you're going to have some of your community that you train up to think about some of these technical things and bridge their own needs and explain them. That's amazing. But we're actually all not really going to see how it's going to work until we can, like, experiment with a live system. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I encourage is that custom clients. So I know Puria is on the call. He's the author of Uranos, and he's been experimenting, but like literally experimenting just by himself as a single coder and designer on integrating other schemas. So I'd like to propose that as one more area of agency. It has trade-offs. You're taking on responsibility for certain things. I'll drop the link in. Uranos is a Next.js app, and it's all front end, which means you can fairly rapidly experiment with different things. So what I'd like to see broadly out of Lexicon community as the next step is working with the developers of client apps and saying, hey, we want to prototype bookmarks. Will you integrate them so we can use them for real? So those are just my like proposed directions. Any reaction to that, Ms. Boba? How does that sound to you and for your community?
Yeah, so I mean, I think definitely, part of why I did this now is because I wanted to be early to these discussions, because as you said, we are not going to see how this is going to work until later on. And this is the time to try and make sure that, it actually works out well for smaller, independent, like more independent communities like we are. And so part of it is I have experiences like doing, like I made Boba board and I ran it as an open source project for my community, and I have like a just small personal instance. So I do actually understand a bit of the Blue Sky team perspective here, and just like how overwhelming it can be to be like, to have to balance all their concerns, and especially for something like that is this big. Some of them are really, really like pressing, like, obviously investors, but also the kind of political climate, which might mean they're, they have to be careful in a way that it may be hard to understand and appreciate for like a lot of people. But to the like, custom clients thing, actually one of my frustrations with the Fediverse ecosystem is that because of the lack of lexicons, in part, it's so incredibly frustrating to, like, my understanding from talking with people that have tried is actually incredibly frustrating to try and make a new client, because you don't exactly know what the semantics that are around the network are, what like everyone is like, stuff is custom. Now there is the schema observatory effort, which is trying to, okay, let's look at all that goes on in the Fediverse and let's try to figure out the schemas. And that's going to make it easier. But part of why I like the add protocol is because they did think about this part, and hopefully this makes it not a nightmare to implement a new client, especially as the thing goes. But I think also there's some ways we can help. Like, if we come together, we can help, because if a custom client doesn't have to go to each lexicon and re-implement its view, then that's easier. Like I can do a new client.
Yeah. So I think there's two paths there, right? Bookmarking is more to like a meta function, and something like events is like a data lexicon or content lexicon. And I think that content lexicon, having that displayed in a way where you can just implement a lexicon renderer. And then I actually think that a wide variety of meta lexicons, I'll just call it that. Nick, I guess we've never really disambiguated, but it kind of makes sense because there's a bunch of Blue Sky meta lexicons. Like I think of a like as a meta. I should not make up words. Anyway, we're making up fandom words now for at Proto fans. Yeah. So, and I encourage you to check out the code base of Uranos, because it's really not. I will say this: like, it is really easy to make a front end only Blue Sky client. Like, really easy.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's that. Again, I think I mentioned this. Part of why I really love Blue Sky, like at Proto, is just because it's modular. And that's like, being able to implement new clients in an easy way, if we can manage to do it and to keep it that way, then this removes a lot of pressure from the Blue Sky team. And it also, again, gives us more agency as folks. And, and it will also ease people's concern, because obviously, like when I go talk with folks, we have been burned in the past, and everyone is like, there is a lot of tension with them owning the APU and like the big firehose and so on when they make quote unquote bad choices at this point. So I feel like if the more we can make everything like we do not actually need you, it's okay if you make choices we disagree with, we'll figure it out. The more we do that, the more everyone is going to be happy, including, I'm sure, the Blue Sky team. Because I can't imagine the pressure they're on right now.
I think that's an amazing end for the video. I want to thank you again, Ms. Boba. That was just amazing. We've got the links there of how to support you. Anything else you want to say on support? It looks like, you've got a background as a senior developer, so you're open for paid app proto projects as well?
Yes, I think by this point I'm kind of like a staff developer level. But yeah, like, we have, I am trying to figure out how to do contracting for work. I've never done it before. But, I have a lot of knowledge of a lot of things. At this point, I've kind of been, I guess, a technical founder. So I've had to do an incredible amounts of things. So, still figuring it out. But if anyone is like, I've seen your talk, I've seen what you've built, and I need some help from someone that can kind of pull it all together, yeah, contact me. We'll figure it out.
Amazing. Thank you, Ms. Boba. We will see you all on the internet.
Absolutely. Spend a lot of time there.
Thank you.